Day 2. This is also recording number 2 because the first one I did, I had like 2 gigantic gray hairs just hanging off my shirt that I didn't see. This is the problem with living by yourself. Nobody notices these things and says, "Ew, you got you." So I was just gonna let it go because what you see is what you get with me generally. But it was so distracting to me watching it back that I'm like, okay, no, we gotta do this over, and I've gotta get my notes. Hold on a second. Because I want to kind of remember the stories that I told and all that, which I have here. So let me I'll show you the reading in a second, but let me tell you what I'm using. I'm using these are the backs, the James Rickliffe. I believe he calls it the RWS 2.0. It's on Make Plain cards. It's a really neat deck. He's kind of cleaned up the line work, different fonts, cleaned up Pixie's line work, and then added a little more interesting coloring. So it's just a really colorful deck. I think it was Toadstool Tarot that brought this deck to my attention, and I absolutely adore it. I love the colors and everything. So anyways, you don't have to see me shuffle because I'm literally recreating the reading that I just did. So I'm using that deck, and for Oracle, I'm using the story cards by Kathy Nichols. It was funny because yesterday, here's the box. She has two decks out. She might have more now, but the story cards and then another one called Synchronicity Oracle deck. And so yesterday when I was looking I like to usually hold up a card that speaks to whatever the reading is or whatever I'm talking about. And I was trying to find a tarot card that spoke to storytelling, and I really couldn't. There probably is one, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And so I ended up, allergies and weird hair. So I was looking for a card to speak to storytelling, and I remembered I had these cards, and so I started going through them, and I found one that said, "Oh no, I've lost it. Where'd it go? Oh, why are these upside down and backwards? Stop it. I really want to find the card now. But anyways, basically, it just said storyteller. I don't know why these are all backwards. What's going on here? Alright, so I tried really hard not to shuffle them backwards, and it's exactly what I did. I don't know how I did that. Oh no, they're all back. I'm not going to bore you guys with trying to go through this, but I really want to show you that card. There it is. So this was the storyteller card that I used for my thumbnail yesterday, and I just adored it. And so after going through that deck again, I thought, you know what, I'm going to use that for tomorrow's reading, and so that's what I'm doing. Anyways, no gray hairs on my shirt today. Yay. That's embarrassing when that happens. I'm sorry. So anyway, so we're going to do this again. So I'm going to bring this down. Oh, and then also got halfway through the first recording of this, I brought the screen down, and slowly but surely it closed itself, shut the whole thing down. So I was like, well, okay, that's the universe telling me to wrap things up, or that maybe the universe telling me that you're gonna re-record this anyway, so let's just stop now. I don't know. Oh my god. Anyways, so I did fess up at the beginning of the first recording to say that I attended a outdoor concert last night amongst my peers because it was just a sea of gray. And I texted my brother. I said, I feel a little out of place. I didn't wear my Birkenstocks today. I'm just amongst my tribe, my people there. Everybody. I went to see James Taylor. And, oh God, he's another one who just wrote the soundtrack of my life. James Taylor, Carole King, the Eagles, Jackson Browne, that whole genre is just, I can sing along with every frickin' song they ever came out with. Anyways, and I was saying that there's something about Definitely something about drinking wine out of a can that makes you feel as if you're at a festival. And so but I'm feeling it a little today. So bear with. I got the fuzzy brain going on. But it was a great concert, and James Taylor is just, he is. I'm going to check this recording. The way this whole day is going, yeah, okay. He is on his game now. The last concert I went to was last year, was Bob Dylan, and he is not on his game, in my opinion. He just, he was never the greatest singer, anyways. But he's just not. It's almost like he's not even trying anymore. He's just really grizzly, gravelly voice. And now I will say that he was quite good when he sang a song in his upper register, but he only sang one, and so that sounded good, but the rest of it was just terrible. So not that James Taylor would ever put on a terrible concert, but you always worry. I mean, the guy's what, 70 something, 75? I don't know. But he could have been 20. His voice was so James Taylor. Just total. I mean, you could, there was a little bit of age in it, but not in his pitch, not in his smoothness. It was a beautiful, fun, beautiful concert, and it was a glorious day here, and so it was really a lot of fun. Okay, so back to the reading. So we have, I'll show these cards. Union, and these are from the story cards from Kathy Nichols. Release. That's such a cute card. And home, which I just love. Oh. And under Union, we have the Four of Pentacles. And under the Knight of Wands, under Release, we have the Knight of Wands. And under Home, we have the Ten of Cups, which is just, yes, please, thank you. Yes, please, and thank you. So let's read about the Four of Pentacles. See what Phil Young has to say about that card. Four of Pentacles. Be careful with your resources. It's a good time to save and be conservative with finances. Upright. Conservation, cautiousness. Author's personal connection. Funny enough, I think about my early piggy banks and saving my coins to buy comic books, but when they were 35 cents. Nowadays, you need a credit card with a substantial limit to buy 10 or 20 comic books. More generally, I think of this card as being solvent. I think all of us want to look at our bank accounts and know that we have more money coming in than going out, and no debt. This card also makes me think of my maternal grandmother, who always had a jar of coins hidden in her cabinet for rainy days. And the writing prompt is, how do you take care of your finances and maintain your security? Well, I've told my debt story a million times, so I'm not going to tell it again. But, the trick is just, I think anybody who's been in debt for any length of time and clawed their way out of it learns the lesson that you just never want to be in that hole ever, ever again. And you make changes in your life to make sure that that doesn't happen. And that's what I did. And I feel fairly secure now. I mean, I got a little Social Security coming in. I mean, I've worked since I was 16, and then stopped taking in a paycheck when I turned 60. But I didn't claim Social Security until I was full retire, not 62, but like 67 or something. Because my financial advisor said, there's no reason for you not to take it now, so I did. And then I pull a little bit from my investment accounts every month, and that's what I live on. And you just kind of have to stay within the parameters of that budget that you set for yourself. And I do that pretty well. Tarot has put a little dent in that early on, but I think I've got that under control now. I think I have a really nice library of decks, all different walks of decks, and that rotate in and out of circulation based on my mood and whatever. A lot of times I will watch a YouTuber bring out a deck or introduce a deck or do a walkthrough or whatever, and I go, oh, I have that deck, but I haven't looked at it in a while, so I'll go up and get it. And then I'm just amazed at how, because so many of the decks that aren't in the full rotation are usually decks that I put aside because for whatever reason they threw me off, be it, renamed court cards, renamed major arcana, who knows what threw me off. But I go back now and look at them and I'm like, oh, what was wrong? Why was this deck confusing you? And that always makes me feel really good because then I know that, in fact, my knowledge base has increased significantly. That decks that used to throw me off no longer throw me off. So that just makes my collection even larger to me now. And that's why I love watching YouTubers, because they remind me of decks that I have that I've forgotten about or put aside for whatever reason, and they come back into the fold, and it's like just getting a brand new deck. It's really fun. So that's good. So that's that story. And under Union, I'm not sure the connection there. We'll move on. Okay, so Knight of Wands. Knight of Wands. Here's the page. Action of spirit. Action of passion. Meaning, you need to go on an adventurous quest. Get out of your routine and explore. Okay, I'm gone. I don't know where I'm going. Upright, driven, and passionate. Others' personal connection. While I understand this card quite well, I'm not really close to it. When it appears in a reading, I'm working with a male client. I refer to it as the Indiana Jones card. If the client is female, I make the connection with Lara Croft. I have absolutely no idea who Lara Croft is, so I'll just think of Indiana Jones. My best example is the trip I took with my wife to her home country in South Africa. It took a full day to get there, and it was a wonderful chance for me to see where she grew up and get a glimpse of her lifestyle. No other adventure or travel even comes close to that experience. Interesting. Travel can do that. Change your life, change your perspective. Just get your juices flowing for whatever reason. So the writing prompt is, what is your most significant adventure and how do you feel about it? I may have read reference to this in past storytelling times, but I'll tell it here. I am a huge Seattle Mariners fan. And I have a best friend from Rochester, New York, who I met while planning an event for him. He was at the time he was doing alumni relations for University of Rochester, I think. And he called to put together an event at my restaurant, and we ended up bonding over the phone. Completely bonded. Literally became best friends in like 5 minutes. I don't know how that. I mean, now that I know him, he kind of does that with everybody. But we became quite close. And I mean, he would call to figure out something about the event, and we'd be on the phone for an hour just gabbing. And now he was single at the time, as was I, but he quite a bit younger than me. So there was nothing. There was never any kind of romantic thing going on. It was just we just became friends. And it took like 4 years for us to finally meet up in person, because when he came for the event, I was gone. I don't know where I was, but I never met him in person for that event. And then it was, down the road, somewhere along the way, he planned another event in Seattle, and he called and said, hey, why don't you come over to this event? It's not just restricted to alumni. And so I did, and that's how we first actually met in person. That's a whole other story, which I will tell another day. But anyways, so this was 2015. I had just moved down to Portland to start living with my dad, and Mark calls me and says, hey, are you watching the Baseball Hall of Fame induction on TV? And we happen to be watching that, and I go, yes, we are. And he goes, okay, look for me, I'm in the Mariners hat. It's like, yeah, right. Thousands of people there, like we're going to pick him out of the crowd. But that was really cute. But anyway, so we started talking, and he said, Ken Griffey Jr. is going to go in next year. You should come and visit. You should come to Cooperstown. And so I'm sitting there, and my dad's right across from me in his chair, and he's listening to my side of the conversation. And I had said, oh, God, I'd love to see Ken Griffey Jr. get inducted, but that's not going to happen. First of all, I couldn't afford that kind of trip. It's just not going to happen. And my dad leans over, and he says, go. And I'm like, and I go, hang on, Mark. And I go, Dad, I can't. I just got here. I can't Well, I mean, we're talking a year from now, but nonetheless, I said, I can't afford it. I know. And he goes, go on this trip. It's on me. First class all the way. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, you need to do this. You need to go. So I got back on the phone with my friend and I said, okay, pencil me in. I think I might be coming to Cooperstown. And so, a year's worth of planning starts taking place. Well, I mean, it didn't take a year to figure it out, but, And I'm not a flyer, which of course my dad knew, so he figured I'd be either driving or taking the train. I think he was the one who suggested taking the train, and I thought, God, that's a great idea. I love the train. Taken the Coast Starlight, which goes from Seattle to LA several times and back. It's just a beautiful trip. If you ever get a chance to do it, I highly recommend it. It's not quite the travel experience that it used to be because they've retired the bar. There used to be a parlor car that was kind of private for all the people in the roomettes. If you got sleeping accommodations, it was just kind of your private place to hang out. They got rid of that. I mean, they've just been cutting costs right and left. So it's not quite the experience that it used to be. But it's still, I mean, train is just a great way to travel, in my opinion. You just, you're kind of, especially now for me, I mean, I'm not a real people person, and so I kind of just hung out in my room, but, roomette is what it's called. But, for people who like to meet people, I mean, it's the perfect thing to do that. And it's just hours. I mean, I think from Portland to Chicago, which is the terminus for the Empire Builder, which was the first train I was going to take, is 45 hours or something like that. And you stop in just the littlest towns. It's just crazy. But anyways, yeah, so the Empire Builder to Chicago, and then from Chicago you pick up the Lakeshore Limited, which then goes all around kind of the southern portions of all the Great Lakes, and then eventually goes down to New York City, I think. I think it ends there. But I got off in Rochester. So I ended up planning this trip, and I thought if I'm going to go to the East Coast, I'm also going to do Southeast Canada because that I have roots there. That's where my great-grandmother lived. That's where my grandmother was born. So that was, so that's a funny story. So my great-grandmother and grandmother never became U.S. citizens. Because they were afraid they would be deported. Even though my grandmother married a U.S. citizen, I think it would have been a matter of signing a piece of paper at that point, but she was just scared. So there was a term called resident alien, and I'm not sure what that means at that time, what that meant, but anyway, so that they both my great-grandmother's husband had died early on, so my grandmother got married, and then within years, just a few short years, my great-grandmother moved down as well in with them to live with them. I bet that was a interesting dynamic in that household, but whatever. So one day I decided to do a little ancestry research, and I looked up the census is it from the 30s or the 40s? I can't remember which one was online, but I found them listed in the Portland census. And under my they write your name and your age and where you were born. And so my grandmother was listed there, whatever her age was at the time this was done. And then under origin or where you were born, she put Detroit, Michigan, which was a full-on lie. She was born in Brantford, Ontario. I have her birth certificate. Or at least I have her death certificate, which says her country of origin was Canada, Brantford. She was born in Brantford. And then my great-grandmother, who's also listed on the census, told the truth. She said, I'm from Ontario, Canada, and I want it noted on there that I'm English. And I don't know, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know whether she said that to get, in case the census taker was going to report her, that she wanted to make sure he knew that she was English. Or whether she just wanted to make sure that she wasn't French. So I don't know which it was. But and I'm sure over tea, because that's what my great-grandmother would have done, is given him some tea to have a chat. and go over these questions that he was going to ask. And I'm sure at the point when she said Ontario, Canada, and she would probably point it and said, and I want it noted that I'm English. And I'm sure he was like, well, we don't really need to say that. And she was like, no, you need to write that down. And so on the actual census form is her name, Ontario, Canada, and then scribbled kind of in the corner in parentheses it says English. Which just kills me. I would have loved to have been there when she was doing that, because it just on no other census form do you see stuff like that. But on this one, he's written down, because I'm sure she said, you're not getting out of here until you note that. That was so funny. Anyways, so I went to southeastern Canada after the trip. So we met in Cooperstown. I met with my friend, and then I got a hotel in Utica, I think is how it's pronounced, which is outside of Cooperstown. It's about maybe a 30-40 minute drive from Utica to Cooperstown, because Cooperstown during the Baseball Hall of Fame season is super expensive, and I just wanted to be mindful. So I stayed in Utica and then drove into Cooperstown and met up with them and saw the induction ceremony. It was so cool, and very emotional. It was for everybody, for Ken Griffey Jr. and for his fans. It was just a really, really, really special moment. And I'm so glad that I went. And then I headed up to Southeast Canada, and I stayed in Montreal for a few days, in Quebec City for a few days, which I fell in love with Quebec City. Oh my God. I stayed in Old Town. And it's just, you're right on the St. Lawrence River. Oh my God. It's just a beautiful town. You feel like you've just been plopped in the middle of some European city. Lots of stone buildings. I won't go. I could go on and on. Anyway, it's beautiful. And then I was gonna go to Ottawa, and then circle back down to Rochester. But I met a shopkeeper in Quebec City, and we got to chatting. And he said, "Well, where are you headed next?" And I said, "Ottawa." And he's like, "Why would you go there?" And I go, "Well, it is your country's capital." And he goes, "Well, I know, but why go to Ottawa when you can go to Toronto?" He said, the Hockey Hall of Fame Museum is there. And I'm like, well, then let me change my plans. And so I did. I never got to the Hockey Museum, although I was right near it. My hotel was actually very nearby it, but I ended up not going. I wasn't a huge hockey fan at that point. I am now, but I wasn't at the time. But I'm so glad I stayed in Toronto. It was so beautiful. It just stunningly beautiful. And Kensington Market, if you ever get a chance to go there, go to the market there. Oh my God, it's this huge outdoor market. It's just lovely. I can't say enough about it. Anyway, so Toronto, and then I swung back down to Rochester and stayed for a few more days, and then just went backwards on the train. Lakeshore Limited to Chicago, and then the Empire Builder from Chicago to Portland. It was the trip of a lifetime for me. It was so fun. It was about 3 weeks, I think. And when I got back, my dad was very glad to see me. He was ready to have some help, but he said, I remember him saying to me, "God, that was a really brave trip you took." And I'm like, brave? Like, I'm thinking, God, I'm having the time of my life. What do you mean brave? And he goes, well, you're an old lady. He's always the first to point that out. Thanks, Dad. But he says, you're an old lady traveling by yourself, technically in a foreign country. And I'm like, God, I guess you're kind of right. And then I said, but you're the banner one, Dad. You gave me the opportunity to do this trip, so I can't thank you enough for that. I mean, seriously. And so it was awesome. It was just an awesome trip. And I got to see. I spent just an afternoon in Brantford, where my roots are from. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but it's funny. They just disliked Canada, I guess, because they never thought about getting a dual citizenship for my mother, which she could have easily gotten because they were both from Canada. I think they just didn't want to tell anybody. They were afraid they'd be deported for some reason. And I don't know if that was a serious problem back then. I really don't know. But they were scared to death of it, so they just didn't want to rock any boats at all. But Mom could have easily become a Canadian citizen as well as a U.S. citizen, in which case my brother and I could have become dual citizens. But she never did that. And it used to be that you could get it through your grandparents. So we did look into that, but unfortunately Canada stopped that connection, allowing that about 10 years ago, I think. So that wasn't going to happen either. But yeah, I would if I was ever going to relocate from where I am now, which I probably never will because I absolutely love where I am right now. But if I ever did, that's where I would go. I would go to Quebec because it's just it's charming, and it's one of those places. I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but when you're out traveling around, every once in a while you hit upon a spot that you just feel like you've been there before. You kind of know what's around every corner. You just have a thick connection with the area, even though you've never been there before. And that to me, who knows what that's from, but, a past life or something like that. I don't know. But I certainly felt that way about Quebec City. And I've only had that feeling one other time before, and that was in Tasco, Mexico. I went down with my parents on a really cool trip down there, and we spent several nights in a town called Tasco, and Taxco, I think is how it's spelled. God, I felt the same way. Like we were looking, I think we got there and we decided we needed to go find a liquor store. And I remember walking with my dad, and I said, I think it's, and I'd never been there before. And I said, I think it's here. And he goes, what? And we go around the corner, and there it is. And Dad's like, how did you know that? And I'm like, I have no idea. And then in the background, you hear the theme from the Twilight Zone going on. It's like, that was weird. So Tasco, Mexico, and Quebec City, Quebec I got some history in those places from something. So anyway, so there's the Knight of Wands, and it's so interesting that it's connected with release. So yeah, I'm a homebody. It's hard for me to get out and travel, but when I do, I eat it up. It's not something that's ever in the forefront of something I'm going to do, but then when I do it, I'm so thankful that I did. It's just one of those, I don't want to go, and then you go, and you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad I went. Whatever. Okay, Ten of Cups, under the home. Oh God, I love this pairing. Ten of Cups, profound joy in relationship is what you need, or need to appreciate if you have it. Happiness with a partner is key. Well, I don't have a partner, but I have close relationship with my brother and his wife and my nephew. So that, yeah, and they all bring me profound joy. Upright, mature love, blessed union. The author's personal connection. This card is wonderful to experience, and it would be fantastic if we could remain in this kind of energy endlessly. Pardon me. But life weaves us in and out of our happiness and unhappiness over the course of our journey. If you have children, then hopefully you will have moments in your family that mirror this card. When I see this card, I think of the first years of my relationship with my daughter's mother, when we were building a life together, choosing to have a family, and rejoicing in the birth of our daughter. Those were very happy times indeed. Aww. And then his writing prompt is, describe one of your happiest moments with your family. So I told a story in yesterday's daily read, first day one of the daily reads, about the baggie taped to the ceiling to corral the roof leak during a holiday family event, which just cracked all of us up. And so if you want to hear that story, go back and watch yesterday's. I guess that was really funny. So that was probably one of the more joyous moments with my family. I mean, we had a bunch of them. We were a pretty happy family. But I would say that the best times we had usually revolved around being at the beach. We would visit Seaview, Washington every year, as long as I can remember, every year during the summer for 2 weeks. And as a child, and even a young teenager, my entire year revolved around waiting for those 2 weeks, because it was just such a joy to be there. And part of it was, well, we'll go to the beach, But the other part of it was that we could, where we lived in Portland, we lived way out. We lived out of the city. We were nowhere near anything except our school. We would walk to school, but there were no shops or grocery stores or anything nearby. Everything we were completely car dependent there. But at the beach, everything was within walking distance of wherever we were. And of course, this was a time when you could run around as kids, basically come home when the sun goes down. That was that we were free to do that, and there was so much interesting stuff close to where we were. We could walk into town, we could ride the go-karts, ride the carousel. There's a place called the Archer where you could shoot arrows at balloons and win prizes, and then the bumper cars, and just all that. Just whatever you wanted, you could do. My brother picked up a lot of his comic books. He mentioned this guy mentioned comic books earlier. My brother, he didn't really collect them, but he saved all his comic books that he bought, and so he loved. We would go to the antique stores around the town, and they would always have just a plethora of old books and old comic books, and Scott would go and fill in his collection, holes in his collection, even though he wasn't technically collecting. But and he's turning around now and selling them for ridiculous amounts of money, by the way. Good for him. I mean, wow. I think he was surprised by how much some of them have gone for. So, but anyways, I digress. So the story I want to tell about, the one that really just cracks me up, is we'd go to the beach, and there was always a passel of kids around. Just we had friends that stayed there usually around the same time, and all totaled maybe 10 kids from 3 or 4 different families. All varying ages. I was usually I think almost always the youngest, but then there was, my brother, who was not always the oldest, but close to being one of the oldest. And so, figure ages, 6 to 14 probably. And so after a day at the beach, the parents have had enough of the kids. They're like ready to get rid of them for some time. And so one of our favorite things to do was they would set up a scavenger hunt for us. And, and the scavenger hunt would be weird things like bobby pins, hairnet, swimming cap, old Coke can, a Budweiser bottle cap, just weird stuff. Stuff that you could find along the side of the road in the ditch, and other things you had to knock on doors. And, nobody thought twice about it. Knocking on strangers' doors at the beach? Yeah, why not? It was a different time. I'm so thankful I grew up in that time, because I have just fond memories of the scavenger hunts. And we had so much fun. And so the kids would all scramble. There'd be, one older child and then a passel of kids under that person. He or she had the list, and then we'd fan out to find the list. And then whoever got everything and came back first won some kind of prize. Probably some bubble gum or something. And it wasn't until I was like in my 50s. And it may have been that I was telling this same story to somebody else, saying, oh yeah, we used to do these scavenger hunts. And they said, oh, that's an interesting way to get rid of the kids at the cocktail hour. And I'm like, what? What did you say? And then I just started laughing, because it was like, oh, they weren't doing it for us. They were doing it for them. It guaranteed 2 hours of kidless time during happy hour. And that just absolutely killed me. That it never ever occurred to me that was the situation. And I remember saying that to Dad at one point, saying, "Did you just getting rid of us?" And he goes, "Yeah." And you're just now figuring that out. Oh my God, that was a great story. That's one of the happiest moments of my family. Anyway, so there you have it. The reading day 2 for today. And thank you so much for coming by. I always appreciate it so very much. And I want to point out my lilacs. I've had a lilac tree out in front of my house since I bought the place. It was there. Since I bought the first year, I had one bloom. Like, what was that? The rest of the tree just leaves. And then the year after, nothing. Year after that, nothing. Year after that, nothing. This is year 5. I've got a ton of them. And I'm so happy. So it's lilac season at my house, at Star and Flurry's house. Anyways, thank you so much for coming by. I do appreciate it. And we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks. Star and Flurry out.